So, welcome to this crossover episode of the iDeas podcast, the show where L&D professionals discuss their big ideas for the world of L&D.
And the blog podcast. That's all I'm going to say.
There we go. It's a much simpler introduction. You can see why Heidi made it to 100 episodes, and I'm kind of languishing in the, another one, really. So, Heidi, thank you so much for flying over and joining us. You've had a bit of an adventure.
I did have a bit of an adventure. My bag wasn't delivered to me until 12:45 a.m. this morning, so yeah.
Already picking up on the signals, love it. We of course have our studio audience with us who will be joining in when they're told to, and perhaps when they're not, which will be exciting. So, low fidelity, high impact, or high impact, low fidelity, whichever way around you want to do it. What are we talking about when we talk about that kind of content?
So initially, my thought was something my friend Mark Shepard said to me, but other iDeas have said to me too, is, well, I can be a good instructional designer with a pen and paper, right? And so how do we, when we hear so much about budget cuts, and L&D is getting cut a lot right now, right? We're being cut from jobs, we're having budget cuts. How can we still create impactful learning experiences when the budget's not there? Because we can.
Interesting. So I agree that in theory, we can be great instructional designers with pen and paper. And perhaps this is more an e-learning developer mindset towards things. Would the business be happy? Because I would agree you can create great training experiences and learning experiences in that world, but businesses, for better or worse, like a little bit of snazz. They like an expensive stock image in the background of their slide. Look at that expensive stock image. You should all enjoy that today. There's an expensive stock image. I'm going to keep saying it.
How expensive was it?
Too expensive.
Okay. Let's talk about that.
You get, these things. You get credits and blah blah blah. But you never want to sit down and work out how much each credit is actually costing you, because then you get really sad really quick when someone goes, "Oh yeah, that's a nice image," and you're like, no, it's a really nice image. There's a reason for that. But that's because businesses want that quite often.
Yeah.
If you pitch them the pen and paper version of whatever you've got, there can be resistance. So can we in theory, can we in reality do that?
Sure. I don't think so. I think you're right. I think there's ways we can be scrappy about it, right? Like there's ways that we can find free tools that are doing what the tool we paid thousands of dollars a year for are doing. Just maybe we need to combine and have like a tool stack instead of one tool, right? Okay. So there are alternatives, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think that kind of tracks. I'm trying to think of a scenario, maybe if anyone's got any ideas where the pen and paper version does work. I mean, I guess literally pen and paper in a room does in theory work.
Well, I'm thinking too about, we just did that webinar, you and I, with Holly Owens on all the tools that we use in L&D. And one of the Q&As at the end, someone said, well, what do you all use for project management day to day? And all three of us were like, notebook and pen, right? And then maybe we'll move it into something more digital. Okay. But we all start with like the note. I mean, look at the tables today, right?
Yeah. Okay, that's enough. So I guess there's another side of this. We've spoken about maybe the low fidelity side of it. High impact. What do we mean when we say high impact content? Because again, I think there's a tendency towards looks glossy, is very exciting, exploding animations, obviously, spins, cartwheels, text bouncing across the screen, all very 90s, but very impactful.
But are they?
I don't know. I guess this was the conversation we kicked off before you all came into the room about what really was valuable and what wasn't. So, prime example, let me ask you. That's really expensive stock image. If it wasn't there, would any of you leave this room saying, do you know what that session was missing? Really expensive stock image in the background.
No.
That slide could have had more broken glass on it.
All right. Would you expect to see something like that when you're attending or paying to attend a conference? You're picking up on the guided answers. Well done. But you can disagree with where I'm trying to guide you. That's fine.
Maybe not. Mixed answer.
An expensive stock image, or could you've got a cheap one?
So is that if I'd have gone for the cheaper one that I didn't like, would that have impacted the quality of the session?
I think you bring up a really important point here, that you picked something that you liked that maybe or maybe doesn't, right? There's mixed answers here, resonate with everyone, right? And I think we do that a lot as instructional designers. I've spent 40 hours a week playing in Beyond. I've done it. I admit it. It was early in my career. I didn't know any better. I was making like a full, it was just like a quick video that was going out to our customer service people about like a survey that was being sent to our customers, and it was for a healthcare company. So they're sent the survey once, and then they're sent it again in 2 years. So I spent 40 hours showing 2 years of passing time in Beyond that was going to be sped up to about 5-8 seconds, building a scenario. 2 neighbors met and fell in love and adopted a dog in this Beyond video. For what reason? Because I thought it was fun to make. But was it impactful? No, I don't think so.
But the other thing that came up in our conversation earlier was, does that mean we should hate our jobs? Does that mean that our enjoyment of what we do, we shouldn't deliberately, I guess, try to hate our job, but does that mean that our enjoyment in what we do is totally irrelevant to the end impact? Or, because I'm not sure on that, because I think it might be, like the very kind of black and white part of my brain is like, yeah, your enjoyment of your job is actually not in any way relevant.
I struggle with that.
Yeah,
I struggle with that because I kind of toggle hard both ways, where I'm like, well, no, you can find a balance, right? And I have yet to meet someone who works in L&D who's not creative. But then the other side of me pulls and goes, well, then use that creativity in your own time, right? Like, this is work, this is what you do, and you can bring it when it calls for it, but you should also have some sort of creative outlet hobby so that you're not using your job as your creative outlet hobby. And that's what I was doing when I was playing in Beyond, is I didn't have any creative outlets. I had like a 12, 18-month-old at home, so I had like no time to myself at the time. So for me, that's why I was doing that, was because I didn't have a separate creative outlet.
Interesting. So I think I'd like to move the conversation on to the like specific modalities.
Yeah.
So what for you would be some examples of low fidelity content modalities that can have a high impact? Because I guess they're not chained together, right? Some stuff is just low fidelity and
Sure.
crap.
This right here, the Sunday school answer to it, right, is podcasting, right? You don't have to have a video element.
Mm-hmm.
There's plenty of ways to get decent audio out of your own computer. So my side hustle is that I teach podcasting for the University of Florida for their grad school of journalism. So I can't require my students to buy equipment to make a podcast. So I've had to be like very intentional about setting up their assignments so that they can record and so that it sounds professional. And so we use things like Audacity for audio editing because it's free. Trials of things like Descript or Otter AI for transcripts and things like that. And honestly, if you've just got earbuds, those are really decent for recording audio for a podcast. And it's a good way to, it depends on how much editing is involved, but like it doesn't have the same requirements that some of the other stuff we do have.
So unsurprisingly, I like a podcast. I listen to a lot of them, record a lot of them. Do you think they're actually effective from a structured learning perspective in a work environment? Do you find them to be an effective way of training people?
I think no matter what we choose, we have to use the needs analysis and the root cause to guide us to that. And I think if it does, then that can be impactful. But I think if we I had a boss that used to do this. She used to be like, I love Canva. We're going to make everything in Canva. And she was like, make me a Canva. She didn't even call it an infographic. She was like, make me a Canva. Make me a Canva of that. How about we put that into Canva, right? And so it was like, let's make everything in the tool instead of let's choose the appropriate tool. So like, I also pitched a corporate podcast once where it was purely about talking to different people throughout the organization to find out what they did day to day, because it was such a large organization that we felt it would break down some silos just for people in the organization to hear what someone else is doing in marketing, to hear what someone else is doing on the sales floor. So in that case, I think that would have been really impactful. But if it's like, let's do onboarding as a podcast, that might not work so well.
It's interesting because the way I've often thought about it with clients is kind of a conversation where if you're trying to not focus on the detail, you want to build connectivity or awareness around something in your business, podcasting can work quite well. Because you can fit it in around other things, and no one wants to sit through 20 minutes of awareness training.
Yes.
Where it's like, what can I do with this? Oh, nothing, we're just making you aware of this thing in the business. No one wants that. A podcast, at least you can crack on with some actual work while you're being made aware of stuff. Whereas I have a lot of conversations, with compliance training, that could be a podcast. Yeah, exactly. So this is really important information that might save someone's life. Well, then don't put it in a podcast.
I was making a face on a podcast too, which is like, I was making an
We're on camera.
ew
There we
face.
go.
Oh yeah, we are on camera. So yeah, I think you're right. And I think sometimes we're also bound by the tools that our organization has. So in that same webinar that we did on tools, someone had asked, like, they said, I work for the government. How can I get new tools? And I've worked for the government enough that I said, oh no, I wouldn't go that route. I would just talk to your IT team and see what you already have access to, and like have that be your like menu of selections, right? When you're picking solutions, that's really kind of what you're limited to, because in government, you've got 18 to 36 months lead time to get a new tool. By the time you get it, it's outdated already, right?
And it's weird that conversation was one of the reasons why we kind of set the topic for this session, because that, I think, is increasingly the world I'm finding in corporate settings, where historically it's been, go work in corporate L&D, you'll get a nice big budget. It's like, yeah, that's not the world anymore.
No.
If anything, budgets are, if they're not contracting, they are being challenged.
Absolutely.
Which tends to come before a contraction or a team being shown the door for lack of results, right? So I guess one thing I'm quite interested in is, other than podcasting, where should we be looking? Because I think there is going to be a need where there hasn't before, where it's, hey, let's buy a Storyline license or an Adobe license or all these great high-fidelity programs, which I love using. Like, I will go home and I will color grade this footage. Not because it needs color grading or that anyone's going to appreciate that, but I'm going to enjoy every minute of doing it. But we can't be doing that in the workplace when someone else is picking up the bill. So what are the other modalities and tools that you're thinking about when you think about low fidelity that can still really land well?
Are we still in an office? Because we could meet in a room. We could do in person, but we could also just do like virtual sessions, right? Again, thinking about what tools your company already has, like everyone has a communication tool or a virtual on-camera meeting tool, or like some kind of messaging, And so like when you're talking about awareness, okay, well, what if instead of making this a 30-minute e-learning, like the order it always is for whatever reason, why don't we just make this a targeted series of communications that go out through our company's messaging system? That's low fidelity, right?
I'm a big fan of email for that.
Right?
As horrible
Training
as the idea
that could
of
be an email.
Well, how many sessions have you run in your life that have been criticized for exactly that?
Yeah.
Like, could you just send me the bullet points? It's like, oh yeah, actually, the whole session that I've just run can be defined in 6 bullet points. Maybe that's all people need.
Yeah, or you have the people that sit on their computer the entire time and they're working, and then when you pull up the quintessential slide, they just snap the photo and go back to work, right?
Sorry for those of you waiting for the slide, it's not going to change.
Yeah, we're not. This is the only slide. But that tells you that whole thing could have just been that one slide, right?
Well, I think that's the challenge, right? Because I think that's, certainly for me, when I first started coming against that, that's quite difficult to hear. Because I love what I do. And I love the process of creating not just content, but an experience or a way that I think something should be delivered. And sometimes hearing someone say, can you just send me the important information? Like, it's all important. I'm that horrible SME in that moment, right? You got to learn everything. My delivery is essential to you understand. No, it's not. My bad jokes had nothing to the learning experience. It makes me enjoy things like this a lot more, but you learn nothing from them except, wow, Tom, he's, yeah. And then you leave and you tell someone else about it, and then they don't come again either. See, it's not even that funny, is it? A couple of mumbles. So you got the camera needs to hear. You know, there we go. That's loud enough. But that's really difficult. So how do we get comfortable with the idea of going, yes, it's low fidelity, but it's finished. It will now work. And how do we then get comfortable deploying that?
Do we need to do that?
I think so.
Why?
Because if we're not comfortable with it, we're going to keep resisting it, is my concern.
Okay.
Right? Because certainly for me, it was only once I figured out that no one else cares that I was finally okay going, I don't like that, but it'll get the job done, so we're putting it out. Until I got that, actually, no one else comes back and says, that image alignment, that wasn't quite right. Or we could have done with some nice imagery here, or that footage wasn't color graded, was it, Tom? No one outside of my little world cared about any of that stuff, but I really struggled to believe that until I was already doing it. So I guess it's like, how would you go about approaching that?
What was the moment that your mindset shifted on that? That you realized that it wasn't about you?
Oh, that's difficult. I think it was an SAP implementation program. Woo! Exciting stuff. But my attitude towards SAP and be what it is, in that I think it's horrible software, I don't know why anyone buys it, but the business basically sat us down and went, everyone hates it. IT hates it, we hate it, or every user hates it because it's complicated. Do you know who it's great for? Our customers. So that's why we're implementing it into our business. And it was that kind of, if a massive company is taking that approach to its entire internal systems, is it possible that in the world of L&D we should be following suit? But it took that really stark example for me to make that shift, you know. And I'm kind of lucky it did, because if I think now is someone, a small business or self-employed, you've kind of got to be careful when you're line item billing someone for something.
Yeah.
You can't have, oh, well, why is that in there? Because it makes me happy. You can't have a line item for contractor happiness, you know, 1,500 quid or whatever in the corner. It's not going to land well. So I think for me, that was that moment.
Yeah, and I think it's hard because it's ego, but it's from a place of being passionate about it, right? And it's from a place of like wanting to do a good job. So it's not like when we talk about ego, we think of like egotistical, narcissistic, you know, like, oh, it's all about me and what I'm creating. But it's like because we care about it. So it's almost harder to realize that ego is in play. And I think for me, it was watching what other people's passion projects were and going, oh my gosh, that's terrible. Am I doing this? And then realizing that, yes, I was. And being like, okay, we really have to focus more, not just on the audience, but also the organization that we're serving, whether we're consultant, whether we're internal to that organization, we're in service roles, right? Like we provide a service to our clients or our company. People should be comfortable coming to us for that. And sometimes they're not. And I think it's because we kind of play a little, you know?
It's interesting. One of the things I found have really helped with that is, this is a relatively recent, kind of maybe a year ago, really started thinking like this, is I spent some time with some software developers. It's a really interesting environment to spend time because everything is this sprint. What can we deliver in the next 2 weeks? Other than that, don't care. Don't want to talk about it yet because we're not at that 2 weeks yet. What value can we deliver in 2 weeks? If it takes longer than 2 weeks, it's too complicated, we're not going to build it. It's like, wow, it really changed how I thought about what I was building. So I wasn't going, oh yeah, no, we'll take a month to develop that in Storyline. It's like, wow, that sounds ridiculous now, doesn't it? They can develop an entire component of this app or this web tool or whatever in 2 weeks and in 2-week chunks and intervals, and I'm saying, oh no, I need a month to develop one piece of e-learning. It's like, that's why people roll their eyes when I quote them. That's why when we say, oh, why don't we have a seat around the table? Because we talk in these very long timelines. We don't talk about value in short term. And I found that once I started going, okay, so what value can we deliver in 2 weeks? Low fidelity solutions became the default. Because the idea of going, oh, we'll spend an extra couple of days just tweaking the finishing touches is like, no, doesn't need to be done. Let's keep moving. Where's the value? What value can we deliver in 2 weeks? Really challenging, but I found it really helped me make that jump in the last year.
Yeah. I think one of the other new low fidelity, not new, why did I say new, but low fidelity, it's becoming popular, is letting SMEs create content. And I know like, we're like, oh, like, see, yeah, you have body language. Oh, it's so gross. But the companies that we're working for are supporting this. They want it because they're like, I would rather have a crappy PowerPoint with all the info that I need than a game to play in a month that has 90% of the info I need, which is an interesting message coming to us from the company. Like, hey, it doesn't have to be as effective as long as I can get it out now and hit like, okay, hitting 50% of people now is better than 90% of people 2 months from now.
Interesting.
And like, that's kind of the trend that I'm seeing, and a lot more LMSs and LXPs, vendors at like DevLearn and stuff, we're talking about, oh, and anyone can create content, anyone, and you know, we're going like, oh gosh, like, no, that's our job. But like, we can still have a job by empowering those people to share their information in a good way and like help them do it in a way that's effective. But technically that's another low fidelity method, right? Is to have the SMEs do a talk and record it, or, you know, something where we can still have control over some of those parameters and like help them implement good educational practices, but let them do a lot of the legwork, right?
Yeah, and part of that to me as well is about kind of self-serve for users. And I'm going to go back to knowledge management, which I don't think is a very sexy field at the moment. L&D gets a lot of the light, but no, I find knowledge management increasingly interesting for that, because we are, certainly when I started, knowledge bases were kind of terrible because they were manually created taxonomies with tagged articles, usually written by people who were either incredible SMEs who recorded their entire life history in an article, or people who knew nothing trying to pull out tiny little things, because no one in L&D wanted to spend time on knowledge management because e-learning was becoming very exciting. We were all building Pac-Man in Storyline and all that kind of stuff, which is great fun, but again, probably not the most valuable use of my time, to be honest. But now, with, yes, some AI stuff, but also just sort of advancements in things, just simple machine learning and auto-tagging and things, and the power of search now, is knowledge management going to replace a lot of the awareness, the basic process training that we spent a lot of time doing? And should that be a bigger focus? Because I can't remember the last time I went to a conference, let's say, and saw knowledge management as a keynote topic or even a speaker topic. We just don't talk about it anymore. And to me, that's kind of like the ultimate low fidelity content from an end user perspective. I need to do a thing. Here's the article that's easy to find that tells me exactly how to do the thing. Great, what more do I want?
Yeah, I've spent the last few years like half in traditional L&D, half in customer education. And in customer education, my team was us on this half with the instructional designers, and then the tech writers and knowledge management on the other half. We made a complete team. And so we were kind of like the video based, like here's some quick videos with screenshots of what you need to do, and high level. And the knowledge management, the tech writers were writing like kind of the step-by-step. And I think you're right, like, because there's so much that could just be like training that could be an email, training that could be an article, a blog, basically. And knowledge management is just so user-friendly now. Like you were saying, the search functionality, the ability to put GIFs and images with the text and have, you know, like the very easy to create pages, and to be able to use your own company's intranet and not have to have people sign into an LMS for everything. Yeah.
Out of interest, how many people in the room have a knowledge management team in their business?
You don't call it knowledge management. I think we would call it content creation, curation. Sorry.
Curation. Oh, okay.
It's about gathering the bits of information or the worksheet or the checklist or the flowchart in the places where it needs to be. So I don't know whether it's the term.
Interesting. Yeah. That's interesting. Anyone have knowledge or curation people in their team? One person.
One and a half hands.
Yeah. Okay. So that's interesting, isn't it? Because the other thing that struck me is my life got much harder when I no longer had a knowledge management or a curation team, because all of a sudden I had to go and find SMEs. I had to dig them out of their work environments, go, hey, I've got another job for you. You're going to come and inform the L&D team. No, you don't get paid extra. No, you don't get any respite from your other job. It's just extra work. Lucky you. Come on. And then we wonder why we go, these problem SMEs not working hard enough. It's like, well, maybe it's not them. I wonder if there's a bit of a change we need there. Because it used to be, maybe not everywhere, but it used to be in many businesses I worked in, knowledge management was a significant team. Usually, in my experience, about the same size as like your central L&D team, who would manage all this stuff, because it is a different set of skills. Mm-hmm. It is sitting and drawing out information and recording and technical writing and documentation. Again, I'm not making it sound like the world's most exciting job here, but I feel like we lost something there maybe.
Yeah. I think one of the projects I most recently worked on was we need a 30-minute e-learning on X, right? And it was, we need a 30-minute e-learning on the hiring process because these hiring managers are submitting these packets wrong every single time. And then I went into SharePoint and it was like, I couldn't even figure out the process from looking at it. And then there was 3 separate emails. One had to have a certain amount of attachments. One had to have another set of attachments. And then when you were done with everything, you had to print it out on a printer and take it to an actual office building so that they had a paper trail of it. And so I went, how about we just rearrange the info here on SharePoint to be friendlier and just automate this process? And I realized every person at that org had access to DocuSign. So I was like, let's do the hiring. And there was a DocuSign consultant, right? So I worked with her and we said, let's automate this and skip the 30-minute e-learning. We never created it because I convinced them like this would be a better option. And it was low fidelity, arguably.
Nice. Well, that's the perfect setup. I'm going to tell you about my favorite book now. So if you haven't read it, Human Competence by Thomas Gilbert. There's a whole section on the importance of environmental change before individual change. And this is basically what that is. The environment sucked. The people were not the problem. They didn't have the information they need, they didn't have the process they needed, they didn't have the software they needed to do the job. You cannot train those away, you just need to fix the system that you've provided them with. Sometimes the button's in the wrong place, basically. And it's easier to fix that for everyone in one big change than it is to try and train stuff away. Again, we still talk about, maybe training's not the answer. He wrote that book in 1973. So I think it might be time for that lesson to be, we've done that bit, what's next? How do we start? We talk about it now and it worries me that lesson is still, we need to keep reminding ourselves, yes, but there's still a lot of training that doesn't need to be training. And there's a lot of training that maybe could be lower fidelity. So we talk about articles, we talk about podcasts. What else have we got?
Curation.
Curation.
You brought up the great point of curation. If we're talking like leadership, right? These like abstract things where we're like, oh, we have to create compliance training. We have to make these, well, somebody's probably already done it, right? If your industry is not that niche or if it's something that's widely applicable to multiple organizations, someone's probably already done it somewhere, right?
Well, this was supposed to be one of the big benefits of moving to a skills-based workforce, right? We've all spoke about that at every conference we've been to for the last couple of years. Skills are relatively universal compared to very specific processes. So by training skills, we should be able to curate more general content, more outside, externally sourced content, rather.
Sure.
At least in theory.
Yeah.
Do you
What
think
about
we're seeing
you?
that?
Can you tell me some low fidelity? I want extras. What have you got?
So I I attended a workshop recently, and I think it's debatable whether or not workshops are low or high fidelity experiences. And I think they can be either.
I think it could go either way.
Because I think if you've got a very, I will use the word formal to describe this kind of workshop style environment. It's a fairly nice venue, it's pretty organised, there's water on the tables, there's someone at the front with a mic, there's AV, that sort of stuff going on. But I attended a remote workshop, and they got there and went, so we're on Google Meet, just not even a paid version of Google Meet, just free Google Meet. So this will end in 45 minutes, because that's when this ends. And there are no slides, but I'm going to put a white background up, and you're going to grab the annotation tool, and we're going to draw stuff for the next 45 minutes together. And I was just blown away like how I wouldn't be brave enough to run that session, I don't think, as a facilitator, because that is basically saying, please don't draw anything inappropriate on the screen. You can kind of tell the sort of people I've worked with over the years that is my primary concern. No one did. I was very impressed at everyone's restraint, not least mine. But it really blew me away that it was one of the best virtual workshops I've ever been a part of. There were no slides. There was obviously preparation involved, but it didn't seem to be. It just flowed with what people were drawing and comment and conversation, and it was fantastic.
What made it impactful?
Context. I think everyone that was there was very different, but we had a very strong shared context in what we were struggling with, which I guess you get in a workshop because everyone's there to broadly do the same thing. But I think what struck me was the broadening from realising that it was less a personal context and more a situational context.
Sure.
Because everything's personal till you meet someone else with the same problem, right?
Sure.
And then it becomes slightly broader and you get a slightly better view of the thing. And that for me that wouldn't have happened had it been a high fidelity workshop. With someone with slides, very formal, quite closed down, longer. If we'd have been there for 2 hours, you wouldn't have got that same frantic, right, it's 45 minutes, let's go, let's draw, let's engage. It would have been a bit more, okay, let's do an icebreaker at the start. So we can all get to know each other a bit better, because that's what we're there to, is to become lifelong friends, not to learn.
I mean, yeah, that's what lunch is for.
Don't
right?
want friends,
Those
just
personal
learning,
questions.
no more friends.
No fun, no friends, just learning. New tagline.
Yeah, we're done with bringing the L&D community together at the LN. Now it's just...
No fun, no friends, just learning.
This is it. There we
Okay.
go. We're coming into our last 6 minutes. And I don't want us to run over. I'm not going to be the one responsible for running over. But I do want to ask if anyone wants to chime in, share an opinion, ask a question, disagree with us on something. Amazing. I'll go at the back first, and then I'll come forward to you.
Do you want me to take the mic back? Oh, sorry.
Run.
Thank you. I was just going to say, I think there is a minimum expectation or a minimum standard that we have. I think, obviously, I come from more of a soft skills, generally, apart from what I do now, management training, all that kind of stuff. And I think there is a level of face validity, whatever you want to call it, a minimum standard that if people walk in the room and there's like tatty pieces of paper and a couple of rubbishy old biros that have been chewed on, you're not going to get people in the room on your side. And to your point earlier, you said about actually your jokes are not useful, but sometimes they are. If you've got a room of people, it's maybe a topic that they're all a bit don't want to accept, that maybe they could develop their management skills a little bit. Maybe a few jokes and lighten the mood is enough to get people to open up and have a good facilitated conversation. So I think there is a minimum level, and humour sometimes helps. So don't, let it go.
Contextual fidelity.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that. Did you want to chime in on that one, Heidi? No? Okay.
So I've been listening to what you've been saying, and your point about the book from '73. I was listening to a lot of it and thinking about Kathleen Moore's book from 2003 or whenever that was. We ought to be getting better at this because it's not new.
Do you have a thought on why we're not?
No, I'm not smart person in the room that you spotted earlier.
You don't have to be smart, just opinionated. That's what I've gone with. Because I do have an opinion on that.
Let's hear it.
And I think the answer, in part, is professional ego. Why don't we want SMEs to create content? Because we're better than them. That's awkward to say out loud, isn't it? But Does anyone disagree with that? I'd be interested if someone genuinely does. Like, I have genuine concerns that I think I can justify when I can say, actually, I think I am, awkward to say, better at creating learning experiences than some SMEs. Better enough to justify them not making content when I don't have enough time to do everything the business needs. It starts to get difficult to not go, am I just being, I'm better, I'm important, I must cling on to my job, which is kind of what we warn people not to do with the growth of AI and technology, because if you cling to the past, you'll fail to get a future, all that kind of thing. I don't know, that's my opinion. It's what I tend to blame. When I find myself on the wrong side of those debates, I try to remind myself, your ego's getting in the way of getting something done here. Just go with it. Because I've missed so many opportunities early in my career that I now can recognise you were just being a knob. Stop it. Just let people do it a different way. Yeah. So that's my view. Again, it's opinion as opposed to knowledge, so take it for what it's worth.
Jeez. I don't know. I don't know if there's... I think people are just naturally resistant to change. And I think that realizing that professional ego, even like how we talked about earlier, when it's like not from a place of, well, I'm better than this me, or, you know, L&D is the most important team at this organization, but it's like really from a place where we want to make a difference and do good, like we can get in our own way. Like that's kind of our thing as humans, right? Like
so, yeah.
We like to do that.
I would say so. We are going to call it there. I want to say thank you so much for coming and joining us. You will now all be on some podcasts. Congratulations. If you haven't been a podcast guest before, you now have. Hey! Heidi, thank you so much for coming and joining us today and having this crossover episode. And thank you for joining us online, Mr. Camera. I'm going to do the fourth wall piece here. Thank you for joining us. Please do come to the next episode, which in my podcast might be in 6 months or a year or something like that. But Heidi, when will your next episode launch?
3 weeks from the last one on Tuesday.
All right, and then after 3 weeks there'll be another one, won't there?
Correct.
Yeah,
That's how it goes.
Well, some people like to run their podcast like that. We take a more relaxed approach in my world. Thank you so much. Enjoy your next session.
Okay.